RGS Mirage という珍しい車さんが今朝のウォーミングアップランの時に火災を起こして、ちょっと残念。
So recently I ended up picking up this book right here from Yahoo Auctions. I was flipping through the pages and I noticed a really cool car. And that car is the one right here. So one of the things that stood out to me though was the fact that this car was running in the 2000 season and also in 2003. And I couldn't help but wonder why there was a Countach running against cars like the NSX, the GTR, or the Supra. After all, by that point, the Countach is kind of a relic, kind of became a relic, given that it's a car that was created in the 70s and 80s. So I looked up the backstory of this car and it was quite an adventure. I think it's worth finding out about. So let's look at the history of this thing. So the history of this car started in 1988 in England. There was a company that was made called Mirage Replicas, and its goal was to create nothing but replica Countach cars. Now these weren't just kits that were fitted on top of the Fiero or the Beetle, they were actual replicas. So Mirage took an original Countach and used it to create molds for their replica. On top of that, they actually built a real interior for it. So all in all, this was actually a pretty close replica, and looking at the photos and videos of it, it's pretty convincing. It's almost a one-to-one replica of the car. Now instead of the original V12 that they used in the Countach, they used a 6.7 liter Chevy V8. At the time, one of these cars would cost you about 30,000 pounds, which converted to dollars, and for inflation, it's about $90,000 today. A Countach at the time was going for about 150,000 pounds. So the weird part is, one of these replicas actually ended up in a motorsports team's hands in the UK. Little information is really known about the creation of the race car variant, but what I gathered to find is that a team called RGS Motorsport collaborated with Mirage to create their GT-1 variant. The GT-1 variant ended up making around 550 horsepower, and the car would be driven by Gary Ward, an ex-Formula 3 driver in the British GT series. It entered in the 1997 season, and it didn't do too well. It ended up scoring mostly DNFs or DNSs, but however, in the 1998 season, it improved, but still got quite a bit of DNFs. Its best position in that season was 8th, and soon after, it couldn't really compete anymore due to regulation changes. After that season, the car was put in storage and it just sat. That is until a Sri Lankan driver by the name of Lanka took notice of the car and ended up purchasing it. He moved the car to Japan, where he would prep it for the 2000 Super GT series under the GT500 category. One of the major changes to the car was to remove the carburetor and add fuel injection. And the other kind of noticeable change that I could find was he just changed the livery to say "Visit Sri Lanka" on the side. Unfortunately, even in his hands, the car's racing luck did not really improve. In the second round of the 2000 Super GT series, at Sportsland Sugo, under qualifying, the car ended up suffering a really bad fire. That season, the car was repaired and only started in one more race, and that was the 1,000 kilometer race at Suzuka. It ended up not placing. After that, the car disappeared for a while, and interestingly enough, Malagamuwa still races with that similar kind of livery, Visit Sri Lanka, with the Sri Lankan flag on the side, in the Lamborghini Super Trofeo series. A few years after that, this kind of Double Z-esque Countach replica kind of disappeared again out of everybody's minds. Until 2003. Out of nowhere, the car came back with bright blue paint and it said LeyJun on the side. So what does LeyJun stand for? LeyJun is actually taking the first part of two names and putting them together. What it stood for is Reiko and Junji's racing team. This team took the old engine out of the car and put in an LS1. It's actually the same unit found in the Mazda MT900R. They ended up modernizing it with a sequential gearbox and completed it for the GT300 class. This time its first round would be at Okayama. It ended up still struggling to keep pace, and they ended up still entering races by petitioning the qualifying sessions. During the race, it completed several laps and eventually ended up off the course. And that was that. Another DNF for this car. After that, in round 3, the car was going to be back at Sugo, the place that had caught fire a couple seasons ago. During the qualifying session, it hit an oil slick and spun, and another car ended up hitting it. Oddly, the radiator mount actually ended up saving the car, and the team was able to repair it once again. The 4th round was going to take place at Fuji Speedway. Initially, it was supposed to take place at the Malaysian Grand Prix, but due to a SARS outbreak, they decided to do a double race at Fuji. After the repairs, the car actually showed great promise. It was gaining positions during the first race, and temporarily it was 9th. And although it ended up actually spinning off the course. Since this had to be a double race, on the 2nd round, it started, but it ended up suffering a mechanical failure and retired. And that was pretty much the end of the racing career for this car. This car kind of had a cursed aura to it, and it really seemed like it wanted to die. But I'd say for an outdated platform, one that looked like it was based on a car from the 70s, it competed against modern machines and put up a okay fight. After all, it was racing against the rule books and regulations, not only its opponents. And sometimes just looking cool, I think, is better than only winning. So I'd say this car left a pretty good impression on the motorsports world. For more rare and interesting motorsports content, remember to subscribe and hit like. See you in the next one.